I think this is the first time we won against a team that won the World Cup. We never won against anybody like Germany. Diplomats are those people who are instructed to promote your national interest in your country where you're residing. When you don't have sufficient natural resources, you have to invest in people. We had to pay the price after, especially 1930s, when militarism arose. Even it was Soviet Republic, Georgia was like a gem. It was like a very colorful cultural center for any diplomat. Question is how strong assurance, to what extent you can give to foreign investors that this very good environment will continue for a long time. 皆さんこんにちは。私の名前今村明です。私は、ジョージアにおける日本大使です。私はインタビューですね、このサカルトベロインサイトのためにインタビューをいたします。ありがとうございました。First of all, thank you very much for having me for this interview. I'm very much excited to be with you and answer your questions. Yes, I was following the yesterday's Japan-German match at the World Cup in Qatar, and we're so excited, happy about yesterday's victory. Although if you focus on what happened in the stadium, I think it was the Germans who were mostly controlling the game and the ball. So we were lucky to be given a couple of chances of making the goal. I think one of or two players who made the goal were good enough to use that opportunity, very narrow opportunity, but they used it for their maximum extent possible. So that's probably the reason we're aiming at to be best 8. We never be a winner of the World Cup football, but if we have won, I think this is the first time we won against a team that won the World Cup. We never won against anybody like Germany. So it's a good start, and we're hoping to advance to the best 16 and hopefully to remain among the best 8. When I was a small kid, I lived in the United States for 2 years because of my father's business. And that made me open my eyes towards foreign countries. So when I grew up to be a university student, I decided to study international relations in university in Tokyo. So that probably led me to think to choose this job. I was searching for a job that is related to any job related to international affairs. I'm very happy that I chose this job of a diplomat after I graduated. Japan was facing this huge confrontation of the East and West. East means communist bloc, was the height of the Cold War. So I was very concerned about this confrontation, especially because Japan was occupied by the Soviet Union on our own 4 islands. It was an illegal occupation continuing from 1945. So when I joined the Foreign Service, Foreign Ministry, you are given some choices of one foreign language to be chosen by yourself to study and in the course of your pursuing your career in the Foreign Service. So in my case, since I thought Soviet Union, our neighbor, was very important in our diplomacy, I chose Russian language for my future career. So that was the first step that I went into this. And it, as a country of rare natural resources in Japan, we put much emphasis on human resources development. And it's same in diplomatic career in Japan. So you are given a 2 to 3 year purely just training of foreign language. So in case of Russian language, since this is complicated language for Japanese, I was given 3 years. And I was just, even after I joined the Foreign Service, I was just studying for the first 3 years, devoting myself to learning Russian language. The diplomats are those people who are instructed to promote your national interest in your country where you're residing. So you have to know what is your home country's interest, what you should be promoting. That's one. But at the same time, you cannot impose whatever you want in the country of you're working. So you have to have a capability to not just to communicate what you want, but also to creatively find the common interest of your country, of your residence. So those are the important, characters you have to communicate well, but also to find the common ground with your counterpart. I was posted in Moscow and Russia in general 4 times, altogether more than 10 years. So every time I went back there, the leaders have changed. So first leader was Gorbachev, and then Yeltsin came, and Putin Medvedev. So we saw, not as a surprise, but tremendous changes every time the leader has changed in terms of economy, politics, and our relationship. So how to cope with this changes and creatively promote the relationship was always interesting, challenging, but also interesting. I was also in the United States, and it was during the time of President Bush, and this tragic terrorist attacks on 11th of September took place in front of our eyes. So we had to cope with the emergency situation, but because Japanese nationals were also involved and they were killed by the terrorist attacks. And at the same time, we were supporting the United States to cope with this extraordinary situation against the terrorists. We dramatically enhanced our cooperation in this area. Well, Meiji Restoration was almost like a revolution, because we pulled down the feudal system and started our modernization. This was coming out of the sense of crisis of younger, lower class samurai who became leaders of the revolution, or the Meiji Restoration, under the auspices of the emperor system. And they thought that Japan cannot go on forever like this under a feudal system. We need to modernize ourselves by importing the most advanced knowledge and technology, and become a stronger state to have a proper place in the world affairs. So that's how we started. It was in 1868. But we were able to successfully move forward in maybe 30, 40 years. In first years, we asked foreign advisors to come and teach us. So our approach was to import the best example of foreign countries, and gradually adapt that to our own conditions. So we gradually replaced those foreign advisors with our own our own experts. Were able to train them and then go on their own. But we had to pay the price after especially 1930s, when militarism arose, and we mistakenly took the path of dominating our other countries, and through colonialism or fighting against those or occupying them, and learned lessons after 1945, after the war, Second World War has ended. Then we finally revived our democratic tendencies, which we had in the 1920s, like your first republic, and we went back to the path of modernization once again. So it was like a trial and error process. Well, as I said, Japan is very scarce in natural resources. So our strategy after the war, especially after the war, not to resort to military means like we did in the 30s and 40s, but to concentrate on peaceful means, which is trade. So we wanted to import natural resources from abroad. For example, we rely more than 99% of our oil from overseas. We don't have oil. But in order to do so, we had to earn foreign currency to pay for those resources. But for us to earn foreign currencies, we needed to export goods that can be competitive and quality-wise sufficient enough for the foreign countries to buy. And in order to create or produce high-quality goods, we needed high-quality people. So our strategy was to invest in our people through education and training, especially not just only education, but maybe on-the-job training after you join your company or private sector. So that's what we did, and then we were able to produce quality goods using the liberal economy environment in the trade sector in the world under the trade liberalization in 1960s and 70s. So that was the key for our economic development. But now we're facing the challenge of rapid aging. So unlike in the 1960s or 70s, our people, of course, it's a good thing that people are living longer. For example, Japanese people live average life expectancy is around 83 or 4. I think 82 for men, 85 or even longer for women. But that means it's much more expense for healthcare, elderly care. So our budget deficit is increasing, and because of the on top of the aging issue, we have the issue of lowering birth rate. So we have only maybe 1.3 children in one couple. That means we are losing population. So we have about 125 million people right now, but we're losing maybe almost 500,000 every year. It's a very rapid, it's accelerating, rapid decrease of population. So that is leading to slow economic growth. And that's a huge question, how we can reverse that tendency. And again, here is the key. The key here is the how to keep the competitive edge of our advanced technologies. We have developed various advanced technologies, but we are facing huge challenges from other countries advancing more rapidly. And so we need to focus on the areas where we have still advantage, and how we can do it, again, to invest in our people, but against the background of this declining population. It's not an easy task, but we're still struggling, but we're hopeful that we can overcome. And this is very useful for other countries as well, because other countries, especially aging rapidly or losing its population, you need to maybe use Japanese experience in order to survive in this very competitive environment in the world. I was working at the Japanese embassy in the Soviet Union, which was in Moscow. And my first visit was during that time, visit to Georgia. I think it was 1988, and it was Soviet Georgia. But even it was Soviet Republic, Georgia was like a gem. It was like a very colorful cultural center for any diplomat visiting from Moscow. And we were I was with my colleagues and my wife visiting first time. We were so much excited to see the history and culture, especially we visited Musketa in 1988 and learn about your very rich cultural heritage. But nevertheless, you're under Soviet rule, and there was no democracy or market economy. So when we came back in 2020, after so many years, we were so excited with the changes that you have achieved over the course of more than 30 years, especially the degree of economic vibrancy, the advancement in your democracy, and the independence that you have gained, and you are creating, independent statehood, which I felt that we can help cooperate each other. So so this was the great change that I experienced in the 30-year period. Of course, we have developed an excellent relations in politics, economics, and cultural ties, and that's thanks to the exchange between our peoples in those areas. For example, in case of politics, we had a very good visit recently by the Speaker of the Parliament of Georgia, Mr. Shalva Papashvili, and his colleagues in the Parliament, and they met with our parliamentarians, including our Speaker. So this is one example, but we have been exchanging this visits by the politicians, political leaders, from the beginning of your independence, and this has been creating a very good political ties. And in case of cultural ties, we have just had, as part of 30-year anniversary celebration, the huge cultural event inviting 5 Japanese artists. They are musicians, Japanese traditional drum players, to collaborate with Ms. Nino Ananishvili's ballet dancers in a one-act ballet called Dreams About Japan. This was conceived by herself, and it's based on Japanese traditional theater, kabuki themes. So these are just examples, but we're continuously putting our efforts to strengthen this kind of ties in those 3 spheres. We've been supporting Georgia's nation building from the very beginning of your independence in 1990s. As I said, our focus always has been on human resources development, because it's based on our own experience that when you don't have sufficient natural resources, you have to invest in people. So maybe Georgia has more natural resources than we do, but I think it's still also important for you to focus on human resources. So our development agency, JICA, has invited more than 600 Georgian experts to Japan to participate in the training and sharing Japanese experience in various areas. That's one focus after the independence. We're pretty much, of course, we are very concerned about the aftermath of the war with Russia in 2008. And 2008 was the year when we were the president of G7 countries. So we took the lead in organizing Georgia Assistance Conference after the war in August. And we were one of the leading countries to come up with the assistance package for reconstruction of Georgia after this devastating war. I think you have a very good business environment in your country. It's liberal, economic policy for anybody, including foreign investors. It's very open to foreign countries. The question is how strong assurance, to what extent you can give to foreign investors that this very good environment will continue for long term. I think the foreign investors are looking for long-term assurance of a favorable environment, which will not change through maybe some kind of political instability. So I think it's important for both countries to bind themselves between Japan and Georgia that this will not be the case. And in order not to have this happen, the change of the policy, we have signed in 2020, just right after I came, I signed the investment treaty with Minister of Economy to bind ourselves to give very strong assurance that this current favorable environment will not change, and even give even more stronger assurance in this mutually binding treaty, not to allow some kind of arbitrary measures. And the treaty, international treaty, will bind not just the executive branch of the government. It will be binding. It is binding the judiciary as well, the courts. So I think it's a very good signal for our investors who are looking for the favorable environment in Georgia. There are two major companies that are operating in Georgia right now. One is in the area of car trade. So they are the major importer of Japanese cars. So Japanese car industries are looking at Georgia as a very favorable market for their export of cars, because Georgia's consumers are not only favorable and purchasing Japanese cars, but they are also that Georgia itself is connected through free trade agreements with other countries, especially your neighbors like Azerbaijan. So these combined market is big enough for those Japanese car exporters to come and sell their products. But not only car exporters, there are energy companies like Japanese energy giant TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, has invested in Georgia's hydropower plant in Daliari near the Kazbegi mountain. And this has also sent a very positive signal to other Japanese potential investors in energy sector. So we're now very much looking at hydropower plants and other renewable energy investment opportunities in Georgia, since Georgia's world number 2 in terms of its reliance on clean energy, which is a major potential of this country that can give to the hydropower production. I think it's just next to Norway. So we're now just agreed with, I signed a memorandum of cooperation with Ministry of Environmental Protection and Agriculture to push Japanese and Georgian businesses come together and agree on projects to reduce emission of greenhouse gas, especially in the area of hydropower plant and renewable energy, but not only. So it should include any project that will allow Japanese companies and Georgian counterparts to agree on the project that will reduce to greenhouse gas. We'll be giving up to 50% of a project of the cost through our grant assistance to promote both sides to start really seriously cooperating each other. Probably lack of awareness, yes. For example, when we did this business forum in November for Japanese companies, one of the emphasis we made on was the opportunity that Georgia can give to Japanese companies as a country that is connected through free trade agreement with European Union. We know a company like Turkish companies that do use this opportunity by transferring part of their business, especially production process, to Georgia from Turkey, and to the final process in Georgia to be so that the product will be exported to European Union. We have a very large investment in Turkey by Japanese companies, and there are lots of Japanese business representatives in Istanbul and Ankara, but they are not investing in Georgia. I think it's coming out of the fact that they are still not so much aware of this kind of successful examples of Turkish companies doing exports from here to Europe. So another maybe challenge is that the issue that the reason why Japanese companies are not, so far at least, has come to Georgia is that is the war in Ukraine. Because of the fact that Georgia is occupied by Russia of its 20% of its territory, and this maybe geographical proximity with Ukraine, maybe it's difficult for Japanese companies right now to make a strategic decision to invest in Georgia, concerned about any negative impact that this war will have. So it's still maybe not the time of the final decision. They are still studying, waiting how this war will end. We of course hope that this war will end as soon as possible, and Russian troops will withdraw from Ukraine as soon as possible, and the war will end in a favorable manner for, of course, Ukraine, but also for Georgia. But it's currently, I think, Japanese companies are still waiting until that moment to come. One of the major functions of our embassy is to provide information, objective information about Georgia's opportunities and challenges. So that's what we're doing right now. And if any Japanese companies, or for that matter, Georgian companies, would like to do business with their counterparts in this country, it's our function to relay that to the other side. So we are ready to listen to those proposals, and we can pass it on to the proper companies or organizations that are interested in doing business together. There's an organization called JETRO, Japan External Trade Organizations, who covers Georgia from Istanbul. So whatever proposal we get from Georgia or Japanese companies, that we can relay that to JETRO representation in Turkey, and they will relay that to Japan, who will do a search for business matching any interested counterparts, potential companies in Japan. And also there's a growing tendency on the side of Georgian companies that are interested in forming organization to help both private sectors, Japan, Georgia, to do business. So now, last year, Georgia-Japan Business Association was created in Tbilisi. So they will also, in cooperation with our embassy, helping Georgian and Japanese companies to have a good matching on the basis of their mutual interests. I think the recognition of Georgia in Japan is gradually increasing. For example, the sumo wrestler from Georgia, Tochinoshin, who once became a grand champion of the tournament, became the most famous Georgian in Japan. So Essentially, this has changed the understanding about Georgia in Japan. There were a lot different TV shows, his interviews, and TV shows about what his mother country looks like, which is Georgia. And another example is Georgian dish shkumeruli, which has become very famous in our restaurants, in our stores. One Japanese restaurant chain offered different ethnic national food of different countries. One was shkumeruli from Georgia. And after offering those different dishes, this restaurant chain did a survey of the consumers, their clients, and shkumeruli got first prize among different countries. So many food processing companies took note of it, and now you can buy ready-to-eat shkumeruli in our stores. You can just put that shkumeruli in a microwave oven, and it's ready after 3 minutes. So it's even easier than cooking real shkumeruli. So I just jokingly say, if Georgia exported sumo wrestlers to Japan, maybe why not exporting shkumeruli from Japan to Georgia? So these just two examples are good ones that show how Japanese are interested in Georgian culture. I think for the sake of tourism, we should really cater towards a special taste of Japanese tourists. They like history, culture, and experience, not just seeing the beautiful scenery. Of course, Georgia can offer the best, most beautiful scenery, one of the most best sceneries in the world. But also, Japanese tourists are very specific in knowing about the background, history, and the art, for example. So, but we don't know much about it. So since I came here 2 years ago, I saw this amazing exposition of in the Georgian National Museum, for example, 2000 BC golden necklace or brooch, and that's something we didn't know. 2000 BC is the time when Japanese were just hunting. We didn't have any metal tools. But you already had not just only metal tools, but also golden accessories for women or men. So this is if you can bring those Japanese tourists to take a look at those treasures, or fresco drawings in the monasteries in Georgia, I think this will be a huge discovery and will gain a lot of attraction of Japanese tourists. So my recommendation is to have Japanese tour operators to be invited by your tourism agency to visit Georgia and look at all those places where Japanese tourists could be attracted, and organize a tour on the basis of that visit, special package for Japanese tourists. The only question is we don't have direct flights. That makes Japanese tourists very difficult to come. So we should start from, for only the summer peak season, charter flights for Japanese tourists that come directly from Japan to Georgia. Then on that kind of pilot experience, we can expand from there. I think Musketa, the monasteries, and that's one. Also food. Japanese tourists are very fond of, tasting foreign food. Of course, wine. Those, eating experience is very important for any Japanese culture, and Georgia has a lot to offer in this, good food experience. Also, I would say experience the art, like the polyphony and folk dance of Georgian, best artist. I think it's amazing. We totally agree with the selection by UNESCO of the Georgian polyphony music. It's a very unique piece of art that also can attract Japanese tourists. Well, I think Georgia is situated in a very strategic position, linking Asia and Europe. So, this middle corridor that goes through Georgia, connecting between the two continents, is very important, not only for Georgia itself, but for the world, including Japan. So, especially because Japan is situated on the eastern edge of Asia. So, for us, if you Georgian can provide this function as a connection, the link between Asia and Europe, even better than now, then of course it will be in the interest of our country as well. So this is something very unique for Georgia to offer to other countries compared to other countries that I visited. We joined the degustation of Georgian wine, and you had such a wide variety of different wine that we could enjoy. So that was a very surprising to us, because in Japan we have very small number of grapes that could make wine. So I still remember that this was a very interesting situation. And also the Georgian who was working in this degustation store, and he was already drunk when he was explaining us what are different types of varieties you have. Maybe he was repeating this message already a couple of times before we came. So he himself was drinking wine together with us. So it was a fun experience. We also got drunk together with him. You have made huge advancements from the very beginning of your independence over the course of 30 years. But at the same time, you have huge challenges as well. One is, of course, the issue of these occupied territories. We're helping the IDPs to lead better life and eventually go back to their hometown in the occupied areas. And of course, we are supporting Georgia's integrity and territorial integrity and sovereignty within its recognized borders. So we are also supporting the peaceful resolution of this conflict. As I said, we have to see how the war in Ukraine will unfold, and of course, as I said, we are hoping for the quick end and ceasefire and withdrawal of the Russian troops. But we're hoping that this will lead to a positive outcome, not just for only in Ukraine, but also for Georgia. And another big challenge is, of course, your Euro-Atlantic aspiration. Japan strongly supports Georgia's accession towards the European Union and NATO. Although we're not part of the EU or NATO, they are both our very important partners, because we share fundamental values with NATO and EU, and strategic interests. Fundamental values, of course, are shared with Georgia as well, meaning democracy, freedom, human rights, and rule of law. Especially nowadays, because of Russian invasion against Ukraine, rule of law in international relations is also gaining importance even more than before, because Russia violated everything, including international law and international humanitarian law. So we consider Georgia as an important partner in promoting rule of law in international politics and international relations. So we want to enhance this, and this will also contribute a lot in a positive manner for your accession toward these two important organizations. Of course, it's not easy. I know some people say that Georgia cannot be part of Europe because it has its traditional value and traditional culture and history. But I say to those people, if you look at Japan, Japan was able to modernize itself, achieve its mature democracy, while preserving our unique culture and tradition. If we could have done it, why not Georgia? That's my response to those people. So I'm very hopeful that Georgia can achieve its aspiration, and we will be continuously supporting it. Japan, maybe with the people who have curiosity and discipline. Georgia, with the people of hospitality and very warm emotion.